Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Carving It Up Live right here on Facebook, as well as the Carving It Up YouTube channel and the Grid Network YouTube channel. As always, I am Bryson Carver, and boy, do we have a mammoth of a show for you today. Normally, I do about 5 topics, especially on a Friday as we're gearing up toward football season. College football has technically already started, but the first official Saturday kickoff in college football is tomorrow. Volview returns in 30 minutes. Very excited about that. Some new predictions for Tennessee. Going to get into that in about 30 minutes. College football playoff predictions. The first season with the new 12-team playoff format. We got a lot of college football coming up, but we got some NBA. Steph Curry signed an extension yesterday. We got some NFL. Bay Area. Brandon Aiyuk signed an extension yesterday. The 49ers broke my heart as a Steelers fan, and I actually think it kind of hurts the Niners. And they're already, you're going to start to see it starting next offseason. The effects of having a limited quarterback is going to start to show the cracks in the armor of what the Niners have put out the last couple of seasons. That in about 15 minutes. What else we got down the pipe? Oh, yeah. NFC West and AFC West strengths and weaknesses. Very excited to get into that today. What else we got in the show today? I'm going to talk about Dak to start off today's episode of Carving Up Live. I think that's pretty much it. Yeah. There we go. Okay. So also as well, my bad. I forgot about this one. I'm not just gonna shortchange anything we're talking about. Colorado won yesterday, and not only was I not impressed, if I'm a Colorado fan or Deion Sanders fan, which I am, by the way, go Prime. I'm worried. I'm a little worried about what's going to happen this year for the Buffaloes. That a little later on in today's show. But first, they never, and I do mean never, cease to disappoint.
How about them Cowboys? Yeah!
So the Dak contract saga continues, and it just got ugly. Jerry Jones was talking to the media, and Dak Prescott responded. Jerry Jones was asked by a member of the Cowboys media, point blank, as you're about to see in this clip I'm about to play, Jerry, what's it going to take for you to give Dak his money?
Jerry, what more do you want to see? What more do you need to see for Dak Prescott to give him a new contract?
Well, you could easily say, if you hadn't seen it by now, you haven't seen it.
Which is a weird quote, and the reason I say that is because literally the next thing he says, I have so much faith in Dak Prescott. I love Dak Prescott, and it's more of a matter of trying to make the contract work for us, right? It's not a matter of Dak's abilities. It's just the fact, man, we just can't fit it in. Despite the fact that prior to the CeeDee Lamb contract, the Cowboys, depending on what website you look at, were either last or next to last in terms of cash spent. So they're kind of a cheap franchise. So Jerry has that quote. Dak Prescott had a little response, not first to Jerry, but Dak's starting to get fed up.
You don't need a deal done before the season.
I don't need no.
Would you like it done before the season?
I think it says a lot if it is or if it isn't. But however, doesn't really matter to me, to be honest with you.
What does it say if it isn't?
Just how people feel.
Which people?
I don't know.
How do you how do you feel if it isn't?
You're right about that.
You open that door.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
I played the entirety of that clip because I've seen that Dak clip where he's saying, it doesn't, if the contract isn't done, that says a lot and whatever. That clip has been played in the national media today. That last part, Dak has always been, in the context of this, like Dak has always been Mr. Cowboy, always politically correct, doesn't give you anything to really write about and be like, oh, did you see what Dak said this offseason? And I freaking love it as a Dak Prescott fan. I'm seeing a new Dak. Dak, the first thing, remember in training camp? He was given the politically correct answer. Yeah, we'll see if we can get it done. I'm focused on the season. And then he kind of paused. He kind of grinned a little bit. He looked to his left, presumably at like the PR manager, and said, I'm going to say it. There's a chance I may play for somebody else in my career. So that's the first time we've seen Dak open that door. That was at the start of training camp a month ago. Now we're seeing him. Yeah, that's going to say a lot if the contract isn't done. And he was asked by a reporter, I don't know if it was Calvin Watkins or somebody else to his right, you just opened the door, right? And Dak very, very casually, yeah, I know. It's like, okay, this is a new Dak. Like this is a guy who's pushing back on Jerry. Like we've known Dak Prescott's had an icy relationship with Jerry Jones over the years. This is a full-blown beef, as you're about to see in this clip.
How do you feel about Jerry said the negotiation isn't about your merit as the Cowboys quarterback, but more about their cap situation? What do you take from that when he says, it's not really about what you're doing?
Yeah, I understand that. That's the business and the nature of this game that we play. I stopped, honestly, listening to things that he says to the media a long time ago. So it doesn't really hold weight with me.
Doesn't really hold weight with me. So that's interesting. It's not nothing. And here's what I was thinking about. Hearing this quote from Dak Prescott, hearing the previous quote we just played from Dak Prescott, and discussing the one from at the start of training camp when he said, I may play for somebody different in 2025. Floating that possibility out there. So much, and this is what has driven me absolutely bonkers. As not only as a Dak fan, but as a fan of objectivity, and being able to understand how we cover other quarterbacks relative to how we cover Dak. Well, he's the Cowboys quarterback. Okay, are we judging him by his play or by his celebrity status? Like, let's get that in mind. It's the fact that whenever folks criticize Dak, so often, or I should say actually very little, do you hear actual substantive, okay, what's he working with? We do that with other quarterbacks. How many times last year? And I get it's Pat Mahomes. He's the second greatest quarterback of all time. Get that. But oftentimes last year, listen, I stood firm on my Kansas City winning the Super Bowl pick, but it was, man, Mahomes is amazing. But gosh, those receivers for the Chiefs, and Kelsey's getting older, and Valdez-Scantling can't catch a pass, and Tony's awful. And we give quarterbacks, and by the way, I think by and large, rightfully so, we kind of give them passes. We talked in years past, a lot of folks about the Chargers this year. Like, man, we like the Chargers, but darn it, Herbert doesn't have a number one guy. Like, they're good by committee, but they just don't have that true number one receiver for the Chargers. We give a lot of excuses to a lot of quarterbacks. That seems to go by the wayside with Dak Prescott. Can you consider the fact, just be open if you're a Dak skeptic or a full-blown Dak hater? Could you at least sit down for a moment, or if you're in a car, keep driving, and just have an open mind to another possibility, and ask yourself this question about last season and about this season. Do the Cowboys have a good offensive roster? And by good, I mean not only top half of the league, but comfortably, top 10 in the NFL. Little CeeDee Lamb is nothing short of fantastic. We know that to be the case. But after that, it's I wrote it down because honestly, with all due respect, I was going to forget some of these guys' names. How about Jalen Tolbert? Brandon Cook's coming off his worst season since he was a rookie. Jalen Brooks. And then Ryan Flournoy, who I'm not going to be hard on that kid. He was a 6th-round pick. He hasn't played in the NFL yet. We don't know what he is. But that's what Dak's got to work with. Oh, and by the way, how about his running game? How about Ezekiel Elliott, who's old and beat up? How about Dalvin Cook, who's going to be on his 4th team in 2 years? How about Rico Dowdle, who actually I think Rico Dowdle may end up being the best player for the Cowboys in the backfield, but he's still Rico Dowdle. How about the offensive line? The fact that Pro Football Focus has it as barely average. They have it as the 15th best offensive line in the NFL. The fact that Zach Martin's awesome and Tyler Smith's fantastic, but they just lost their starting center, Tyler Biadasz, to the Commanders, and they, for reasons I cannot comprehend, let one of the greatest offensive tackles of this generation, Tyron Smith, just walk to the New York Jets. So the O-line undeniably got worse. The backfield wasn't good to begin with. Respect to Tony Pollard, but the backfield wasn't that good a year ago. And the wide receiving core, this is why it was critical for them to sign CeeDee Lamb, because without him, they're awful at that position. Ask yourself this question. Dak have a great coach? Because many of the same people that criticize Dak are the same people say, why was McCarthy fired after that Packers loss? McCarthy, he's a lame duck coach. He's entering the season on the hot seat. He's probably in the hottest seat in the NFL. Him and Nick Sirianni and Mike McCarthy. By the way, I like McCarthy as an average coach in the NFL. I don't think he's as bad as some folks say, but I don't think he's great. I don't think he's Andy Reid, Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, Sean Payton. I don't think he's those guys. Ben Johnson, if you want to look at offensive coordinators for the Detroit Lions. Oh, yeah. Speaking of offensive coordinators, Seemed like I remember a time in which between 2021 and 2022, Dak Prescott had objectively, one of the worst offensive coordinators in professional football, Kellen Moore. How do I know that? Well, A, the tape says that he's uncreative and resorts to curl routes on third down and long. But aside from that, if we're just going to go by results, it's funny. The worst season of Dak Prescott's career came with Kellen Moore. And then Kellen Moore leaves, goes to the Chargers, goes to Justin Herbert, who I love, by the way. And Justin Herbert has the worst season of his career. It's why, not to spoil my predictions on the Philadelphia Eagles, don't know if I love him this season. Like Jalen Hurts, don't like him at all if he's with Kellen Moore. Where Kellen Moore goes, quarterback play declines. And Dak Prescott took that offense to number 1 both years, or the last 2 years that he was with Kellen Moore. So I think we should acknowledge across the board, Dak's never had a great coach. Dak's never had a great offensive coordinator. Matter of fact, his last one before McCarthy's the de facto OC, was bad. Kellen Moore's a bad OC, point blank. Also consider the fact that just so much of the logic surrounding the Dak criticism is so flawed, is that we put a microscope on Dak Prescott that we simply don't put for others, even some that many folks consider as better than Dak Prescott. Dak's a better, look at the numbers, look it up, Google it. Dak's a better playoff quarterback than Lamar Jackson. If the criticism, Dak doesn't perform the regular season, well, a guy who always performs the regular season, similar to Dak, Lamar Jackson, even more so than Dak, got 2 league MVPs. You would think, especially being with a well-run franchise in the Ravens with a great coach, John Harbaugh, we would hold Lamar Jackson to a higher regard than Dak. And we should, by the way. I think Lamar's better than Dak. But Dak's been better in the postseason. He's got just as many wins in the playoffs as Lamar, more pass yards per game, better touchdown-interception ratio. That does exist. Justin Herbert, who most consider to be better than Dak, again, love Herbert, but it's at least noteworthy that Herbert's been in the playoffs 1 time in 4 years, and in that playoff game against Trevor Lawrence, who most people don't even think is good, I'm not one of them, had a 27-0 lead, blew it. Yeah, the defense screwed up. Yeah, the Chargers didn't run the football, but they spot you a 27-zip lead, 4 turnovers in the first half off Trevor Lawrence, and you can't get the job done? That's not noteworthy? So when we go up and down this list of the great quarterbacks, guys, I acknowledge some better than Dak, some I have Dak over, are outstanding. We do not give Dak the pass. We give those guys when they make comparable money and have comparable regular season accomplishments to Dak. Some of which, in the case of Lamar, with more around him in terms of organizational stability, great coaching. So this is what drives me absolutely insane. I think it's kind of driven Dak to his breaking point. Not about the criticism about him. Dak could give a dang about the criticism in the media, but about the fact that he plays for an owner and general manager who has countless times been looking to kick Dak to the side, absent contract negotiation. Let's take out the negotiation period that came before Dak's first big deal. Let's take out this negotiation period. Let's act like they never happened. When Dak Prescott was lighting the league on fire as a rookie in 2016, Jason Garrett backed Dak. The locker room backed Dak. The fan base backed Dak. Everybody backed. Tony Romo himself backed Dak Prescott, except for Jerry Jones. Time and time again. Well, Tony's ready to go. Tony's. I remember Dak had a bad, after leading the Cowboys to 11 straight wins that year. He has a bad game in New York against the Giants. By the way, last time he lost to the Giants, it's been 8 years. And Jerry was openly floating the possibility, hey, Romo, pretty good. Even more insulting, because Romo was a dang good quarterback. Not just outstanding. He wasn't like Brady or anything. Romo, I think, was a top 10 guy most of his career. You know who isn't? Cooper Rush. And in 2022, Dak Prescott, after leading the Cowboys to the number 1 offense in 2021, gets hurt first game of 2022. Cooper Rush comes in, and to his credit, did his job, did what was asked, didn't turn the football over, they played very safe, very conservative football. They ran the ball well. O-line played excellent, and the defense was amazing those first few games of that season. Cooper Rush did his job. And Jerry Jones goes to the media, hey, Quarterback controversy in Dallas. You never know. I think the let's say Dak's in Kansas City and it's not Mahomes. Do you think the Hunt family's doing that? Think Bob Kraft's doing that? You think what's his name in Los Angeles? Forgetting the guys. Stan Kroenke's doing that. You think the Maras are doing that? You think any of these guys are flown out the possibility? Oh, yeah, the backup who we have to shrink the playbook significantly for him to be successful. We may replace the starter with him. So, look, I said this weeks ago when Dak first kind of made his I'm standing on it against Jerry Jones. This is refreshing as a guy in myself who's backed Dak for a long time, who has all but begged him to leave Dallas since 2020. And Dak knows that there are better options out there. And again, I will stand on it now, and I think I'll be proven correct on this in March. Dak Prescott will be a Pittsburgh Steeler. Russell Wilson, not the long-term answer. Justin Fields, darn sure in the long-term answer. And the Steelers won't be bad enough to pick in the top 5. A Carson Beck, a Shedeur Sanders, something like that, Quinn Ewers. Dak Prescott's going to be available on the open market. And you're telling me Dak, who has had nothing but chaos, instability, and dysfunction around him for almost a decade. In Pittsburgh, it literally is the exact opposite. Great coaching, outstanding roster, a front office that's willing to be aggressive and spend big if they think they have a shot to win, and an ownership in the Rooneys. They let the GM's GM, the coach's coach, and the players play. What a concept. Hey, the words of LeBron James when it comes to Dak Prescott coming out against Jerry Jones.
It's about damn time. It's about damn time.
Yeah, it is. It's again, at least if you are a Dak skeptic, at least be open to the possibility that a lot of the shortcomings that he's had in Dallas. And by the way, all stats provided by StatMuse, all the graphics provided by my guy, Alfred Parsar Jr. Could we at least throw this out that Dak almost won league MVP last year? Last season, first in touchdown passes, second in TD and interception ratio, first in completion percentage, third in pass yards, second in passer rating, second in QBR. Yeah, let's let that guy hit the open market. While we continuously go cheap, bungle contract negotiations, and refuse to hire a coach that will challenge Jerry or strip Jerry of some of his executive power. Listen, I saw what Dak said, and 2 things. Man, this is a straight up beef now. This is a beef now between Dak and Jerry. They were always had an icy relationship. It's a beef now. And second of all, he's leaving. I said last month, and I'll pull up the clip whenever free agency rolls around. I'll play that clip on my show in March. Dak ain't staying in Dallas beyond this year. And what's going to happen is the Cowboys are going to be picking in the top 5. I would say certainly the top 10, maybe in the top 5, at least one of the next 3 years, top 10, 2 of the next 3 years. And they'll go back to being the average, let's be honest, kind of irrelevant franchise they were post-Troy Aikman retirement and pre-Tony Romo. That's what they're going to be, and Dak Prescott's going to be playing in Pittsburgh and competing for Super Bowls. That's what's going to happen. At least be open to the possibility that, hey, the Cowboys been failing since before Dak got there. Maybe a little bit of this has to do with Jerry. It's a thought. I'm telling you, it's such a. It's not even that folks criticize Dak for the playoff failure. Listen. After the Green Bay game, listen, Dak did not play. Dak was awful in the first half. That pick 6 that he threw, I forget who, was it Savage? Darnell Savage? I forget who it was for the Packers that on the pick 6 off Dak. Horrible throw. Horrible decision. But in fairness, if we're going to be objective about this, and that's what we aim to do on Carving It Up, and this is a literal statement. The Cowboys could have scored every single possession, and it still would have been a close game, because the defense got absolutely torched by Aaron Jones and the Packers offensive line. So at least be open to the possibility that could be a little bit as this might be on the Cowboys. Patrick, big Cowboys fan, by the way. What's up, Patrick? Romo was getting paid top QB money, equal playoff wins, but no outrage. Well, I don't want to say no outrage. Romo got a lot of criticism, Patrick. Most of it I thought pretty unjustified. As a lifelong Cowboys fan, I'm prepared for the worst beyond 2025. Yeah. You know, I have a saying that there's The best place to be in sports is competing for titles, is a great team, at the top of the league, of your respective league. The second best place to be in sports is absolutely dreadful, but you got a bunch of picks and you just go rebuild, like the Lions did a few years ago. They had 1 million draft picks. They had a couple pieces here or there, and they had a culture-building coach in Dan Campbell, and you see what they are now. They're a perennial contender, 2 years after that trade was made. But the worst place to be in sports is smack dab in the middle. And that's where the Cowboys are because the roster isn't that good. Mike is outstanding, well, at least for the first 3/4 of the season. Dak Prescott, as consistent as they come. CeeDee Lamb's awesome. Zach Martin, declining player, but he's still very productive. Tyler Smith. Trayvon Diggs is coming off an injury. Knock on wood, he's ready to go. I think Deron Bland is being heavily overvalued coming into the season. Heavily overvalued. The linebacking core isn't very good unless Overshown is some sort of revelation for that defense. And then the back end, the safeties are don't buy them at all. And the interior of the Cowboys defensive line is just dreadful. Dreadful. And yep, I'll make my predictions next week. Pretty good shot they get in the playoffs. Still. Because their quarterback and their wide receiver are freaking awesome. That can win you a lot of games in this league. Now, the problem is if you have Trey Lance or somebody else, Cooper Rush throwing to CeeDee Lamb, it's not going to yield the same results. CeeDee Lamb, as great as he is, he does play a dependent position. Kind of why I feel bad for Justin Jefferson in Minnesota. So, there you go. All right, let's transition to the 49ers, who just signed. This just hurt my soul, man. Signed Brandon Aiyuk, 4 years, $120 million. He got the second most guaranteed money. So Brandon Aiyuk's going to be a 49er long-term. Now, as a Steelers fan, I was just shell-shocked by this. I was under the impression a few weeks ago when Andrew Filippone, respect to him, by the way, reported that the deal had essentially been agreed to and that it was a situation where just the specifics of it needed to be kind of hashed out, but just needed some dot some I's, cross some T's. As it turns out, Brandon Aiyuk is now going to be a 49er for at least the next 4 to 5 seasons. So for the Steelers, it's a bummer. I'm curious. I'm wondering if we'll find out in the next few days as more information comes out about the contract, about what the asking price was for Aiyuk. Because if it was like a first-round pick and George Pickens, that to me doesn't help the Steelers that much. Ayuk's better, obviously better than, well, I should say obviously better, but right now he's better than George Pickens. But the whole point of acquiring Aiyuk is to get kind of a 1-2 punch at the wide receiver position. And the Steelers, to their credit, the good news for them, they draft receivers as well as anybody in the NFL. Like that's a lot of teams do. The Packers draft receivers pretty well. In Pittsburgh, it's a darn pipeline of wide receivers in that organization. So, and they drafted Roman Wilson, who I like. So I think there's some things to be optimistic about with the Steelers wide receiving core. But more importantly for the 49ers, because that's a team that's going to have more success than my Steelers this season. And that's where I kind of think it's going to end, is this season. This year for the 49ers has a lot of 98 Bulls last dance feel. Now, not in the sense that where the Bulls, whatever happens, happens. What did Jerry Krause tell Phil Jackson? You go 82-0, you can go 16-0 in the playoffs, and I'm still firing you, which is nuts. So, but that's what happened. And they won the championship. Jordan hit the game-winning shot, and they blew it up. Jordan retired. Phil Jackson got fired. A whole bit. That's not going to be the case in San Francisco. Shanahan's going to keep his job. It'd be idiot. Shanahan will be off the market in 2 seconds if they were to somehow fire him. And the roster still retains some of their key pieces. It's going to be a much slower process than that 98 last dance was for the Bulls, and here's why. In signing Aiyuk, and keep in mind, this graphic I'm about to show you doesn't include Aiyuk because they're actually front-loading his contract. So he's going to make about $47 million between now and like April 1st or something, early April of 2025. So they're front-loading this deal, which is smart. I think it's a good thing to do for the 49ers, given where they're about to be cap-wise. Next season, and this is mind-blowing. Like I talked about with the Cowboys, they have, now 2 guys making over $20 million this year in Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb. The Bengals have like 1, Joe Burrow, because they're a notoriously cheap franchise themselves. The Cardinals as well, I think. It's just Kyler. The San Francisco 49ers, how different are they from the Bengals, the Cowboys, the Cardinals, in the sense that it's actually the other guys, not the quarterback, that's making a ton of money. Let's show this graphic, okay? 6 49ers are making $20 million or more next season in 2025. So we'll start from the bottom up. Nick Bosa, cap hit. These are all what their cap hit's going to be. Nick Bosa, $20 million. Kittle, 21. Debo, 24. Fred Warner, 30. Hargrave, 28. And Trent Williams, $34 million. And they just paid Aiyuk. And they haven't even paid Purdy yet. And they're going to, and this is what's going to, it's going to be a really, you think this Dak stuff is interesting? It's going to end in March, mercifully. This Purdy thing could get a little interesting in San Francisco because the 49ers could say, and it's going to depend a lot on what the Niners do this season. They're obviously a Super Bowl contender. They have, if you tell me if someone came in a time machine and said San Francisco won it all, wouldn't be shocked. It's going to depend a lot on what they do. But let's say they repeat last season or they lose in the NFC Championship game, but they're in the Final Four once again. Third straight year. John Lynch, who's a great GM, can go to Purdy and say, okay, we're obviously going to pay you more than what you make now. You're like one of the lowest paid players in professional football. You're obviously way underpaid. What is it, $800,000, which is a lot for most people, but for a Super Bowl quarterback, that's underpaid, and that, you know, and then some. But John Lynch can go to Brock Purdy and say, if you take a pay cut, we can maybe keep Deebo Samuel, who will be almost in the state that the Niners are in now. Now that they extended Brandon Aiyuk, now that they are in a position they're going to have to pay Brock Purdy, I imagine what the market is going to say a guy like Purdy should get. Deebo's not going to be a 49er next year. He's not. They're going to have to move him. They just want enough cap space. You may have to start losing guys because of age, like a Trent Williams, who, I don't know, might be the greatest left tackle of all time. Certainly of the 21st century. Like Trent Williams is, I've always said, Trent Williams is Shaq as far as left tackles. As you cannot get around Trent Williams to get to the quarterback. You just can't. He doesn't give up sacks ever or pressures. You'll have to lose Debo. You may have to lose Trent Williams. Now you start to get down. You're going to keep Bosa. You're keeping your edge rusher. Ayuk's there for the long haul as well. But Javon Hargraves, you know, a dominant guy in the middle of the defensive line, you may have to lose him. And that may be a guy that you have to move on from. The 49ers have boxed themselves in to a point where if they don't win the Super Bowl this year, and again, I think if you look among the contenders or the teams we think are sleepers, baby, nobody has more pressure on them to win the Super Bowl than the San Francisco 49ers. Dallas isn't good enough. The Detroit Lions, if they don't, well, they're still that's still Detroit. Green Bay, yeah, but you're young. We're not going to hold it. It's not an indictment on Jordan Love's career if they don't win the Super Bowl this year. The Bears are too young. And who else? Philadelphia, it'll be a disappointment. There's pressure on the Eagles, but it's not going to be disastrous for Jalen Hurts or somebody. I don't think they're going to blow up the roster if they don't. I think they'll blow up the coaching staff, but not the roster. The Chiefs pressure is to go for a three-peat. That's pretty good pressure. That's fun. The Ravens will still be around. The Joe Burrow still will be there. Oh, there's pressure on San Francisco. This roster that's been no lower than the third best in the NFL the last half decade got to a Super Bowl, got to an NFC title game. Here's the progression. 2019, they got to the Super Bowl, had a 10-point lead, lost to Mahomes. The next year, the injuries wrecked their roster. They missed the playoffs. Okay, whatever. The next year, make the NFC Championship game, hold a double-digit lead, lose to the LA Rams. The next year, NFC Championship game, then Purdy suffers the injury from hell to his elbow, and they basically literally don't have a quarterback on the field against the Eagles, lose that game. Last year, get to the Super Bowl, lose in heartbreaking fashion to Kansas City. After, by the way, again, leading by 10 points. There's pressure on Kyle Shanahan. Nobody's asking, is Kyle Shanahan a great coach? I think he's got a comfortable spot amongst the top five with Reed, Tomlin, McVay's in that group. He's in there. Pressure on Purdy. There's pressure on this whole Niners roster. That had they not extended Aiyuk, had they gotten something in return, given how well San Francisco drafts skill position guys, maybe you would have been able to give Purdy a little bit more money and mostly keep the roster intact. Listen, San Francisco, now, they need Trent Williams in that lineup ASAP. They need him desperately. But they're in a spot right now where 2025, we could be having very real conversations about about the San Francisco 49ers potentially missing the playoffs. I'm dead serious. Because respect to Brock Purdy, that ain't a guy who can carry a pretty good offense to a Super Bowl. Like Purdy, respect to him. He's not a carry the team guy. He's not a blank check guy. So once we get to the Purdy negotiations, that is when it's going to get really, really interesting. That's all I'll say about that. But listen, rosters like not even rosters like the Niners, teams like the Niners that have this continued level, by the way, a lot of postseason success. Basically as much as you can have the most postseason success you can have without winning the Super Bowl. Ask the 1990s Bills, okay? 91 to 94, they go to 4 straight Super Bowls. No team's ever done that, and they lost all 4. I still don't know how that happened. But that's where we're at right now with San Francisco, where and we're going to, if they don't win the Super Bowl this year, and they have to start kind of tearing pieces away starting next offseason, starting with Deebo Samuel, we will kind of look back at this. Not that the Niners will never compete again. They can rebuild this thing up, but I do think 2025 will be a little bit of a bridge year. It could be 2026, depending on what they pay Purdy. I think we will look back on this sort of mini era, if we can call it that, for the 49ers and say, man, biggest disappointments? Biggest playoff disappointments? Man, this is going to be a really, really interesting season for the 49ers. Listen, I'm not like floating, they can miss the playoffs. No, they're not missing the playoffs. They're too good. But a lot of pressure. Let's put it that way. See what we got. Yep, Patrick is right. Niners will have to break down the team after this year. Once Brock gets paid, they'll be over the cap. Deebo and Kittle could be cap casualties. Listen, they cannot move Kittle. Like that is Kittle, Trent Williams, and McCaffrey, to me, are the clear MVPs of that Niners offense. Deebo is too. Deebo's in that group. Like Aiyuk, here's what's so weird about them paying Aiyuk. Given what they were at in terms of their salary cap. Ayuk's fantastic. Aiyuk, if you look at his numbers, has gotten better. Kind of like CeeDee Lamb, same draft class, has gotten better every single year. But he's not to the level of a CeeDee Lamb or a Jefferson or a Jamar Chase, a Tyreek Hill. He's not on that level. He's excellent. He's a Pro Bowl guy. He's not on that level. They drafted the kid Pearsall out of Florida. They could easily draft. Listen, wide receivers are up and down the draft every single season. They could easily draft a wide receiver next year. It's interesting. And Patrick is right about this. John Lynch has maximized their roster. Credit to them by plunging and going for it all. Again, it's sort of to that point, Patrick, but one of the things I just said about us, or about how we'll view this Niners era if they don't win the Super Bowl this year, or with the cast they have, is, especially in today's NFL, with all the great quarterback play, we'll look back and say, they had literally everything but the guy at quarterback. And that's not to say Purdy's a bum. People think I hate Purdy. I think Purdy is a very good quarterback who's put in a system where basically nobody fails. Unless your name's Trey Lance. Like that's the exception. But man, a lot of pressure. Patrick, $50 million per year will get it done, but depending on how the season goes, knock on wood, Purdy doesn't get hurt. If Kyle Shanahan flops, does it cause concern as far as they can get it done? Listen, again, I want to emphasize this. If they fire Kyle Shanahan, it will be like when the Eagles fired Andy Reid. Andy Reid was the chief. He got fired by the Eagles. And what was he hired like a few days later by the Kansas City Chiefs back in 2013? Coach was like, and by the way, we've seen situations like this where, like, anybody who knows football knows Andy Reid's a great coach. But maybe the relationship between him and the Eagles, it was kind of fizzling out a little bit. And it just wasn't necessarily going to work long term. Maybe it was time for a divorce. Maybe that's going to be the case with the Niners and Kyle Shanahan. I don't think that's going to be the case. Maybe it will be. Very fast. I'm just interesting season coming up for the Niners. I'll put it that way. Let's see what we got. Papa J is in the comments. He says, I actually would say those guys are not on Brandon's level. Those little scrawny dudes don't look like Brandon does. Brandon makes Deebo and CMC and Kittle look good with their yaks. Listen, and again, Aiyuk is a Pro Bowl level guy. He's not better than CeeDee Lamb. Because one thing you got to realize about CeeDee Lamb, about a Justin Jefferson as well, is that they command so much attention. That's one thing about Aiyuk. That was going to be one of the very few downsides about him ending up in Pittsburgh, is he was going to command more defensive attention. I really like Pittsburgh, my Steelers' offensive skill personnel. It's not as good as San Francisco. Few are. I think only like the Lions and teams like that can say they're as good as the Niners in that regard, is he was going to get more defensive attention. You know, you don't have a George Kittle, you know, taking up attention by the linebacker over the middle of the field. You don't have a Christian McCaffrey who can do basically anything. Same with Deebo Samuel. By the way, Jawan Jennings is productive there. My man, go Vols. About to get into the Vol view in just a second. So, like, is Aiyuk a top 10 receiver? Probably, but he is not in that discussion of the best receiver in the league. He's just not. Respect to him, but he's not. All right, here we go. Okay, so a lot of college football is going to be coming up in these next couple of segments. Man, I've been waiting for this for a long time. And I'll get into my playoff predictions, my college football playoff predictions, in about 12 minutes or so. But a segment we debuted last season on Carving Up Live, the Vol View. Oh, it feels so good to say those words on a Friday afternoon. Oh, here we go. So Tennessee is opening their season at home tomorrow, about 45 minutes. 12:45 is a weird time. But 12:45 in Neyland Stadium against the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, the Chattanooga Mocs. And a lot of expectations with the Vols that I'll get into in just a moment. But the Season 2 debut of the Vol View begins right now.
Football time in Tennessee.
Indeed, it is. The Vol View back for Season 2. Man, it's good to hear those words again. It's football time in Tennessee. So, I'll predict Tennessee's game in just a moment against Chattanooga. But, so college football's back. Tennessee's back with brand new expectations this season. Again, this is last year was odd. Because 2022, Tennessee went from being a good bowl team in the SEC to, for a time, number one in the country. Number one team in all of America in the 2022 season. Injuries to Hendon Hooker blew that season up in smoke. They end up winning the Orange Bowl against Clemson to end the season 11-2. A season ago, they go on. They win some big SEC games against South Carolina and Kentucky, but they lose to teams they should, like Alabama and Georgia. They lose a tough one to Missouri, and then they lose in the swamp against Florida because they always lose in the swamp against Florida. I don't know what to say at this point. And then they end up finishing with a 9-4 record with a bowl win against Iowa. And in that game against Iowa, you saw a kid by the name of Nico Iamaleava. Special player, number one quarterback recruit in the class of, I guess it had been 2022, 2023, I think 2023. True freshman last year, comes this year rather as a redshirt true freshman, and is going to be the guy for Tennessee. So just quickly, I'll get this out of the way. Tennessee's going to beat Chattanooga tomorrow. Like let's not get that twisted. I think it's going to be a blowout beyond blowouts. 56-10. That should not have had the little March Madness logo, but nonetheless, 56-10. Tennessee's going to beat Chattanooga tomorrow. But as far as the season, what's Tennessee going to do? What should the expectations be? Well, I'll lay out my college football playoff predictions in about 10 minutes, but it's a 12-team playoff this season. So, and I'll kind of lay out the format of the 12-team playoff, but sort of a spoiler alert, teams 5 through 11. If you don't win the SEC, which, spoiler, I don't think Tennessee will, teams 5 through 11, that's basically like the wild cards. So after our I'm basically explaining the rules right now. After the 4 conference champions, we'll go the highest ranked to lowest ranked, 1 to 4. SEC, Big 10, Big 12, ACC. From 5 to 11, it's the best teams, the highest ranked teams after that. And then 12 is the highest ranked, or sorry, not the highest ranked, the highest ranked conference champion that didn't come from one of the major 4 conferences. So you could have a Tulane, you could have a Liberty, a Boise State, something like that. So Tennessee's, I think their realistic goals are to be in that spot. So predicting the season, I think they're going to beat Chattanooga tomorrow. Next week, though, in North Carolina, they take on NC State. Now, NC State's the 24th ranked team in the country, and that game is going to be at Bank of America Stadium in Charlotte with the Panthers play. It's going to be the Duke's Mayo game. And it's going to be essentially a home game for NC State, I think, although Tennessee fans could take over that spot. Tennessee's a 6-point favorite in that spot. NC State's got a really solid football team this year. I think Tennessee gets the W. They come home, they play Kent State at home on a Saturday night. They'll win that one. Here's where it starts to get tough. Brand new team, the SEC, Oklahoma. They go to Oklahoma in Norman, the first time that the head coach of the Vols, Josh Heupel, returns to coach against the team in which he had a lot of success with back in the day. He was a Heisman finalist with the Oklahoma Sooners. That's going to be a tough one. Oklahoma, it says right here, is a 3.5-point favorite. That feels about right. Listen, Oklahoma, I really like their defense coming into this season. Offensively, I still have some questions in terms of consistency, especially when you consider the fact that they have a defensive head coach. I'm going to go Tennessee wins that one by a walk-off field goal in Oklahoma. They start the season 4-0. Go to Arkansas, who I don't buy at all. They win convincingly in Arkansas. 5-0. Home against Florida. Here's what I do know. Florida is going to be one of the 3 or 4 worst teams in the conference this year. They're bad. They don't have a good coach. I don't like their quarterback. Their roster isn't good by Florida standards, certainly. Here's what I do know, though. They play their best game of the season against Tennessee. I don't know what it is. It's a rivalry game. It used to be like the third Saturday night September game between Tennessee, or fourth Saturday in September rather, between Tennessee and between Florida. That's not going to be the case this year. They happen to play this season on October 12th. And by the way, October 12th, holy cow. You've seen the schedule for that in college football? Good Lord. You better not schedule any weddings, anybody, okay? Postpone it to the 19th or something. So Tennessee plays Florida. Florida's going to take them to the wire. I see Tennessee right here as a 10.5-point favorite. Take Florida in the points. They're going to play their best game of the year against Tennessee because they always do. But I say Tennessee wins in a close game there. 6-0. They host Alabama. That's a tough one. Kalen DeBoer, I think, is one of the 5 best coaches in college football. I think the fact that when Nick Saban retired, and I'm a big Nick Saban guy. Can't hate Alabama. Love Nick Saban. When Nick Saban retired, it was Rejoice City and Knoxville and really all over college football, particularly the SEC. Well, they replaced it with Kalen DeBoer out of Washington, who, again, I want to reiterate, I think is one of the 5 best coaches in America. That felt not unfair because, who cares about fair? Fair is where you go to get cotton candy. Who cares about fair in sports? They got Kalen DeBoer. They got Jalen Milroe, who I was very skeptical about coming into the season. Still don't love him as an NFL prospect, but played excellent football at the end of the year. That throw he made to Isaiah Bond in the Iron Bowl game against Auburn, stuff of legend. It was a beautiful throw, great play, and Alabama almost came that close to beating the eventual national champion, Michigan Wolverines. I think Alabama will go to Neyland and beat Tennessee. Tennessee will then, after a bye week, come back home, or stay home rather, and play Kentucky. And listen, Kentucky has played Tennessee tight in the past, but I don't think they're particularly well coached, in terms of the position groups. Their quarterback situation is Tennessee will beat Kentucky, I think, handily. They tend to take care of Kentucky at Neyland Stadium. Home game against Mississippi State, that's a win. Mississippi State is going to be very good this year. They go on the road to play Georgia. Listen, Georgia has owned Tennessee since 2017. I was actually there in Neyland Stadium when they whooped us 41-0. I was there in Neyland last year when they played us, and after Jalen Wright scores a touchdown, first play of the game, you can't hear yourself think. Georgia silenced the crowd in short order over the course of the rest of that football game and won convincingly. Tennessee's not beating Georgia in Athens. Let's get that thought out of our heads. But then they're going to finish with 2 wins against UTEP at home, and then on the road, might as well be at home, against Vanderbilt in Nashville, Tennessee, to finish 10-2. Tennessee will go 10-2. Nico Iamaleava will end up being a Heisman finalist. I'm not saying he's going to win the award. He's going to be a Heisman finalist with guys like Travis Hunter, Dylan Gabriel, and company. I think he's got that special of a season. I think Josh Heupel caught a lot of criticism last year because of the fact that, hey, Hendon Hooker was very successful and should have still gotten an invite to New York despite the injury for the Heisman ceremony, was great. Tennessee was number 1. And then Joe Milton comes in, who's more tangibly gifted than Hendon Hooker. I mean, almost freakish arm. He said he can throw a football. He said the other day he can throw a football 95 yards. I believe him. I believe him. I've seen that kid throw in person. It's like nothing you've ever seen. But he doesn't see the field particularly well. He tends to panic in the pocket, unlike Hooker, and I think unlike Nico, who's more mobile than a guy like Joe Milton, sees the field, makes quicker decisions than Joe Milton, and fits the offense as well as Hendon Hooker did, which plays right into Josh Heupel. He likes to go hurry up offense. He likes to put 3 receivers on the far left or far right side of the sideline, throw a lot of screen passes. Tennessee likes to run the football effectively. They'll do that with Dylan Sampson, who I love, by the way. And Tennessee's offensive line is as strong as there is in the SEC. So Tennessee will go 10-2. Where that will put them in the college football playoff rankings, well, you'll just have to find that out in a few minutes. But Tennessee will go 10-2. The losses will be to Alabama and to Georgia. The toughest win, in my view, will be against, 2 wins. Florida, shouldn't be the case, but Florida always plays them tight. And then on the road in Norman, Oklahoma against the Oklahoma Sooners. Those will be 2 tough games that, to me, in that stretch, Florida, Oklahoma, or I should say, Florida, Oklahoma, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee needs to split those games. And again, would it help the resume more if they beat in Alabama, or especially if it were Georgia? It's say they beat Alabama, but they lose to Florida and Georgia. I still think that helps the resume more than if they beat Florida, Oklahoma, lose to Alabama, Georgia, because it shows, hey, Tennessee's great, but not quite in the level of those teams. We'll see. But that's where I got it. 10-2. The 2 losses are to the Crimson Tide and the Bulldogs, the Georgia Bulldogs, not Mississippi State. Not Mississippi State. They're love Dak. Shout out to Dak Prescott. They're not losing to Mississippi State. So there you go. So that is it for this week's edition of the Vol View. Tennessee is going to beat Chattanooga 56-10. You heard it here first. And Chattanooga in the Southern Conference is in FCS football. Solid football team. They went 8-5 a season ago. They're not coming to Neyland. This isn't going to be an Appy State, Michigan type situation. They're not going to go to Neyland and beat the Vols. That's not going to happen. Tennessee 56, Chattanooga 10. Take Tennessee to cover. What's the spread? Like 30-something? 38.5. It's a lot. I wouldn't advise betting on that, but if you did, take Tennessee, or if you do rather, take Tennessee to cover. So that is it for this week's edition of the Vol View.
Football time in Tennessee.
The voice of John Ward, man, it never ceases to give me chills. I got to put my Dak hat back on. Here we go. So there you go. Vol View's back, season 2 on the way. And I have a feeling we're gonna have some fun episodes, some fun segments of that, especially once we get to some big SEC wins against Florida, Oklahoma. And by the way, does Patrick have a comment? Let's put up Patrick's comment. He says, I have no idea what Florida State will do. At least I have Michigan to keep me occupied. Long as the Wolverines beat Ohio State, I'm happy. Well, you'll see where I got Michigan in just a second, and Ohio State and Florida State and all the states, all the big programs in college football, just a second. But listen, I got to say, Patrick, and I'm not trolling you because you're an objective Florida State fan. Most aren't. I have had a really good run on Florida State for going back to last December. How could they not make the college football play? Remember that? Remember how ridiculous that was? Oh, we went undefeated. What do you want us to do? I don't know. Look good. Look like a top 4 team. That has to matter. How you win, I'm sorry, it matters in college football. Alabama lost 1 game. That was to Texas. Bama beat, Georgia, the back-to-back national champions. Florida State barely gets out alive in the ACC championship game, doesn't break 20 points. I'm not sure they broke, what they get barely over 200 yards of offense. It was a disaster. Alabama was better. And you saw what Alabama did against Michigan. And when the Florida State players, they had the audacity to, some of the players were tweeting about, get what they deserve. Karma's Alabama. They go out there and get absolutely waxed by Georgia, who, by the way, had a better case that they were screwed than Florida State. And Florida State comes into this season, goes to Ireland for week 0, plays unranked Georgia Tech, and loses on a walk-off field goal. Listen, Florida State fans were coming after my neck back in December. Awful quiet now. It's not gonna lie. I haven't gotten as many mentions by Seminole lovers in the last few months. Yeah, so that was and also too. Look, nothing again. I'm sure I don't know what the kind of kid. I'm sure he's a good kid. DJ Uyunglele is not very good. Yeah, it doesn't matter whether it's Clemson, it doesn't matter where he goes. He's not a good quarterback. So Florida State fans go see that this year. By the way, this is unfortunate. Then I'll get to my playoff predictions. Dang, that sucks. This says that Grizzlies guard G.G. Jackson broke his 5th metatarsal in his right foot earlier this week and will have surgery on it next week. Wow. That sucks. Listen, nobody's going to mistake me for a Grizzlies fan. I've been quite critical of that franchise, but G.G. Jackson's a good kid, really nice young player. That sucks. Listen, prayers for him that he's able to recover quickly and get back out there for the Grizzlies, because he's a nice player. He really is. You saw, especially with all the injuries that Memphis had last season to Ja and to other guys, kid can play. And so hopefully he's able to recover quickly from this broken foot. The surgery goes successfully, and he's able to get back out there on the floor and be effective, because kid's got a bright future. So definitely prayers for him. So now that since we're on the college football track, it is, I think, my obligation and my duty to go beyond the Vol view, to predict the college football season in terms of who wins their conferences and who makes the college football playoff, and most importantly, who wins the national championship. So first, to explain. So college football has undergone a lot of change, to say the very least, in the last year. You've had teams join other conferences. You had Texas, Oklahoma join the SEC. You've had teams like Colorado, who we saw last night. I'll talk about them in a few minutes, join the Big 12. We've seen teams such as Oregon, such as USC, UCLA, and Washington join the Big 10. A lot of conference realignment, which I think is great for college football. I'm not sure it's great for other sports, but it's great for college football, which is what pulls in a lot of money for these universities, for these programs, and is able to give us great matchups on a week-to-week basis that matter. We hadn't really seen that in college football over the last few seasons, other than the occasional Oregon, Washington, or games like that, some Alabama, Georgias here and there. By and large, we've gone through some weeks in college football where it's one solid game with like the 12th ranked and 21st ranked team in the country. That's not what we're wanting to see. Ohio State, Oregon, that's what we want to see. Alabama and Georgia, that's what we want to see. We want to see these big matches, which they were going to play anyway. But USC and Michigan, that's a fun matchup. Texas against whoever in the SEC. So the new playoff format, so the folks complain for years, 4 teams is enough, 4 teams is enough. I pushed back on that for years. Up until NIL, up until the transfer portal really kind of changed the landscape of the sport in a major way, how a team can instantly improve over the course of an offseason and drastically improve their shot of winning a national title. And so at that point, I'm like, 4 teams probably isn't enough. Here's how the playoff works. It's pretty simple. It's pretty simple. So the top 4 teams are not necessarily going to be the top 4 ranked teams in the country. The rankings and the seeding is totally different. That's it. The ranking does play factor, but that's a little later on. Simply put, the top 4 seeds in this new 12-team playoff will consist of the conference champions of the Big 4 conferences, of the Power 4 conferences. The SEC champion, the ACC champion, the Big 12 champion, the Big 10 champion. Those 4 The 4 teams win those conferences are automatically in the top 4, and then they rank them obviously based off of their rankings. Those are the top 4 seeds, and they get a first-round bye. So they won't compete in the first round. Teams 5 through 11, it's basically like wild card teams. That is essentially based off rankings. So you'll have, the SEC's loaded this year. So let's say, for the sake of argument, let's say Georgia wins the SEC. We're going to have an Alabama. You're going to have a Texas. You're going to have other squads competing for some playoff spots. Tennessee. You're going to have Ole Miss. You have teams competing. LSU for playoff spots. Same in the Big Ten. Oregon, Ohio State feel like they're on a collision course, but you could have Michigan. USC could be a sleeper. Penn State. A lot of potential contending teams in the Big Ten. Well, they can get in. 5 through 11. Notre Dame, by the way, obviously can't win a conference title because they're not in a conference. Notre Dame, the highest they can be is the 5 seed. Notre Dame can be in. 5 through 11 is like wild card teams. The last team that makes the college football playoff is the highest ranked conference champion outside of the Power 4. So you could have a Conference USA champion. You could have an AAC conference champion. Whoever's the highest ranked of those teams is number 12. That's how it works. And so, just to, sort of give you a reading, like Tulane a couple of years ago would have been in the college football playoff. So, that's as the 12 seed. So that's how that works. So, go ahead and put up my predictions. Go and put up the graphic. These are, and I'll read it off for those that are listening on the podcast. These are my top 12 teams in the college football playoff. Go. Number 1, winning the SEC, I've got the Georgia Bulldogs. This is a team that's won 2 of the last 3 national titles, including back-to-back in 21 and 22. They returned their starting quarterback, Carson Beck. Georgia is, we know, a pipeline of talent in college football. They're coming back. Kirby Smart's an awesome coach. They're going to win the SEC. They're on a revenge tour. They feel like that 3-point loss to Bama in the SEC title game, feel like they got screwed over out of the playoff. They're going to come out, hair on fire, and they're going to come out and be the number 1 team in the country once again. Number 2, I went back and forth, Oregon, Ohio State. I decided to go with Oregon. I trust Dylan Gabriel more as a quarterback, and I trust Dan Lanning. And by the way, I'm a Ryan Day defender. I don't think Day is near as bad of a coach as some Ohio State fans like to make out. But Dan Lanning, to me, is an awesome coach. He comes from the Kirby Smart coaching tree. He's gone to Oregon. He's turned that program completely around in terms of going from a respectable, New Year's Six Bowl team to this can win the national championship type of team. Oregon wins the Big Ten. They're number 2. Utah, the old Utah Utes, who my man Barry Grant Jr., shout out to him, came on this show and had to wax poetic about in a Southern accent 2 years ago. It's on the YouTube channel. Y'all can look it up. Utah's going to win the Big 12. A lot of folks, there's some Colorado hype here. That Colorado's not winning the Big 12. That's going to be Utah. They've got a lot of returning pieces. Their quarterback has been there, it feels like 10 years there. So they're going to be in a good spot to win the Big 12. And I got Miami win the ACC. So there's a lot of differing opinions. Clemson, people still believe Florida State, despite the loss to Georgia Tech, can win the ACC. I'm going to go with the Miami Hurricanes. I like Cam Ward. I like what he brings to the table. I think they're well coached. I like the squad they've got there in Miami. A lot of momentum coming off of last season and through this offseason. I've got the Hurricanes as the last team in as the conference champions. So those 4 teams, Georgia, Oregon, Utah, Miami, they will get first-round byes. They will be in the college football playoff as conference champions. 5 through 11. I've got Texas at 5. Quinn Ewers has grown on me. He's gotten better over the last few years. I love that he shaved the mullet. Shows, to me, and as far as I'm concerned, a sense of maturity. Listen, Sark is one of the best coaches in college football. He comes obviously from the Saban tree. It's a really great story in terms of what he's overcome to get to where he's at. Texas got a lot of returning guys. A lot of dudes are going to be playing on Sundays after this year. Texas is number 5. They'll be in a battle with Georgia for the SEC all season long. Ohio State at number 6. Again, I'm a Ryan Day defender. I don't think he's near as bad of a coach as some folks make him out to be. This Ohio State roster is absolutely ridiculously loaded. Up and down the roster, I could see a scenario in which, remember that Ohio State draft in 2016 when they had Zeke, they had Joey Bosa, they had a bunch of guys go in the first round and throughout the draft as a whole. Don't be shocked if that's the case once again for the Buckeyes for the upcoming 2025 draft. No question a title contender. Number 7, didn't think they'd be here after Nick Saban left, but they got Kalen DeBoer. They're not going anywhere, the Alabama Crimson Tide. Alabama's going to be the 3rd place in the SEC. They're going to be at number 7. Jalen Milroe got a lot better toward the end of the season. They have an excellent wide receiving core. Offensive line, I still have some questions, but Milroe can make plays outside the pocket. And Alabama, it's kind of like the Baltimore Ravens and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Their identity has and always will be defense. I like what they bring to the table once again defensively this year. Alabama's at number 7. Notre Dame's at number 8. Again, well-coached squad. My man John Rivera is going to like this. Notre Dame in the college football playoff at number 8. Love their defense. Love what they bring to the table. Tough schedule that I think they'll be able to survive and put together an impressive 10-2 season, which will put them above at number 9, my Tennessee Volunteers. You already heard my prediction on the Vol View. Tennessee is going to go 10-2, the 2 losses being to Georgia and to Alabama. Nico Iamaleava is going to have a Heisman caliber season. Josh Heupel is going to return this team to the not return it to the playoff, get it to the playoff for the first time in program history. That's probably kind of hard to see right down there at number 10, but that's Penn State. I think their quarterback, is it Drew Aller? Is that his name? Is a special player. He could end up, in my estimation, being the best quarterback in this upcoming draft. Best or second best. Beck and Georgia's really good. I've been a James Franklin guy for a while. I thought he did a great job at Vanderbilt. I thought he and Penn State should have been in the playoff back in 2016, despite being 10-2. They'll be 10-2 this year in a brutal Big Ten conference. Probably them and the SEC, the toughest conferences, no question, in college football. Penn State will be at number 10. At number 11, listen, I went back and forth between a lot of teams, given that the 11 spot is kind of like the last wild card spot in the playoff. I had thought between Clemson, between Florida State still potentially, Michigan, LSU. I decided to go with Ole Miss. Listen, Lane Kiffin has been there a few years. This is kind of the opportunity now with Jackson Dart, by the way, Anakin Skywalker lookalike, and a darn cool name. Jackson Dart's a great college football name. Listen, Ole Miss their identity has been offense ever since Lane Kiffin got there. No surprise, he's a great offensive guy, but this is kind of the put up or shut up year for the Ole Miss Rebels. This is an opportunity with the SEC getting better. They've got a lot of guys that are going to be going to the NFL in the future. This is a season for Ole Miss with Lane Kiffin where they need to get to the college football playoff. I've got them at number 11. And number 12, I've got Liberty. Listen, Liberty has been in a New Year's Six Bowl very recently. This is a team I think that's got really, really good coaching. I think Liberty is going to be that last team in the college football playoff. So that's what I got. Put up the list one more time. 1 to 12 in this order. The conference champions: Georgia out of the SEC, Oregon out of the Big Ten, Utah out of the Big 12, Miami out of the ACC. The wild card, or at least I call them the wild card teams, 5 to 11, will be the Texas Longhorns, the Ohio State Buckeyes, the Alabama Crimson Tide, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, the Tennessee Volunteers, the Penn State Nittany Lions, the Ole Miss Rebels, and at number 12, the highest ranked conference champion outside of the Power Four will be the Liberty Flames. So there you go. That's my college football playoff predictions. And in terms of who I think is going to meet in the national championship and who's going to win in the national championship, I think these two are the best teams in college football. I don't want to say not close because there's a lot of talented teams this year, but out of the Big Ten, Oregon, out of the SEC, Georgia. That's my national championship right there. And by the way, Georgia's going to be playing a home game on January 20th in the great city of Atlanta. So that's going to be a home game for Georgia. It's going to be a tough matchup for the Oregon Ducks. But who wins it, you ask? Well, my prediction: who wins the 2025 College Football National Championship in the inaugural 12-team playoff? It will be the Oregon Ducks. The Oregon Ducks, led by Coach Dan Lanning and quarterback Dylan Gabriel, will win the national championship in their first year in the Big Ten. I've heard some skepticism on Oregon. Oh, can they adjust to the cold weather games? Oregon plays a very physical brand of football. Adding Dylan Gabriel will only enhance their passing game, especially in the fact that he's replacing Bo Nix. That's a huge loss for them. Bringing in Gabriel will help them tremendously. Listen, I think this is a team that's got everything top to bottom in this roster. Their defense is just loaded with NFL players. And again, I think Lanning is one of the most creative and smart offensive coaches in college football. Georgia, you saw, they were good on offense, but not quite what they were once Dan Lanning left. You saw the impact he's having with Oregon. So Oregon Ducks win the national championship. They beat Georgia in Georgia, and what will basically be a home game for the Bulldogs. But there you go. That's what I got. Listen, I understand those that may take Ohio State or Texas or some other team, some other sleeper potentially, Notre Dame maybe. That's your national championship. And I know, listen, it's a chalk pick. Number 1 versus number 2. I get that. But that's where I see it going. Oregon wins the national championship, and they beat Georgia to do so in what's basically a glorified road game. So there you go. So listen, again, last college football take, about to get into Colorado. Listen, this is going to be a very different college football season, but listen, different isn't always good all the time, but I think in this case it is. Listen, not that the old system in terms of how the conferences were aligned was bad. It wasn't bad. I am going to miss, Pac-12 after dark, these 10:30 kickoff games leading into NFL Sunday. But being able to put more powerhouses in more powerhouse conferences is just good for the viewing experience. It's good for big games in college football. It's good for networks. It's good for fans. It's good for players, good for coaches. Now, I understand the concern of those who say, well, what about volleyball? What about basketball, baseball, softball? Some of these other sports that don't get the shine that college football gets, I totally get that. The reason these executives made the decisions that they made, the reason that these teams went where they went, it's about the bottom line. It's about the fact that college football is about the most profitable sport in America outside the NFL and, to a certain degree, the NBA. So there you go. Okay, speaking of college football, we've done 3 straight college football topics. I'm not sure I've ever done that on Carving Up Live, but who knows? There's a chance we may do that from time to time moving forward, because I am absolutely stoked for this upcoming season. Let's talk about Colorado. So they won yesterday against North Dakota State, and North Dakota State has been the powerhouse of the FCS. If memory serves me correctly, I think they've won like 6 of the last 7 FCS national championships. They're a force to be reckoned with. It's why Colorado, given the fact that while I thought they got better in the offseason, they're coming off of a 4-8 season. It's why Colorado was only a 10-point favorite, 10.5-point favorite against North Dakota State. And credit to the Bison, they did cover yesterday in Boulder. Colorado won 31-26. So Shedeur Sanders was great, 26 of 34, 445, 4 tuds, 1 pick. Jimmy Horn was great. Travis Hunter is a freak. Travis Hunter's going to be one of the first 5 picks in this upcoming draft. He's an elite corner. He's probably a better corner than he is a wide receiver. And as a wide receiver, he went for 7 catches, $132, 3 touchdowns, including one of the catches he made in the back right corner of the end zone where he had positioned his hands perfectly against the defender. Kid is just, he's so special. I think he was the number 1 player in his recruiting class when he came out and went to join Coach Prime initially. The kid is really, really special. This season could be a disaster for Colorado. It really could be. So here's the thing. They face an FCS team, but it's not just any FCS team. It's by far the best team in the FCS, North Dakota State. I mean, North Dakota State's literally produced 2 top 3 draft pick quarterbacks. Now, neither of them really panned out. Carson Wentz in the long term didn't pan out. Trey Lance didn't pan out at all. But that still didn't happen. They were still very successful in college. That last, because you can excuse, listen, we've seen teams get scared by, and by the way, Colorado isn't exactly ranked. They're not exactly a powerhouse. They're just talked about a lot, and for good reason, because primetime Deion Sanders is the head coach. There's no question about that. And he's done a lot for that program. He's done a lot for college football in terms of viewership. The numbers back it up. But with that said, we've seen teams get scared by lower rate franchise or lower rate programs. I thought that last few minutes stretch for Colorado was horrifying. So Colorado gets the ball. It's 31-26, which of course ended up being the final score. But they've got the ball at their own 25-yard line with 2 minutes left. Okay, North Dakota State has only 2 timeouts. Colorado on 3rd down and 8 gets a penalty on a 3rd down. What was a weird pass interference play. Colorado's got a 1st down. 1:41 to go. North Dakota State has 1 timeout. Colorado throws the ball on 1st down. Not only gives North Dakota State an extra 40 seconds, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Colorado punted to North Dakota State with 34 seconds left. Had they run the ball on that 1st down, North Dakota State would have got the ball back. So that was, and I love Deion, that was as bad of clock management as you can possibly imagine. And listen, clock management in college football tends to be way worse than the NFL. Like, that's the thing. Anytime I've ever gotten into a debate with folks, oh, what's better, college or NFL? Listen, the college football atmosphere is unlike anything else. It is awesome. And the games, the intensity, the tradition, the band, all that, the everything. NFL's way better. We know it's better in terms of talent. That goes without saying. The coaching is infinitely better. It's infinitely better. You do not see, if this is an NFL game, a team's got the ball, first down, minute 40 to go, other team has one timeout, and you've got the lead. You're running the ball 3 times and probably running the clock out. To make it worse, North Dakota State's got the ball on their final possession at their own 8-yard line, no timeouts, 31 seconds left. They came 4 yards away from winning the game. If that quarterback for North Dakota State, if the kid had, and I'm not taking a shot at him, but if he had a better arm, North Dakota State would have won that football game because it was a Hail Mary throw that was caught, but at the 4-yard line. So what's going to happen? And by the way, and this was the criticism of Colorado coming into the season in terms of on the field, was, especially a season ago, they get worked up front. Offensive line's bad, defensive line's bad. They got worked yesterday. The fact that North Dakota State ran the football for 157 yards. Colorado ran the ball for 59 yards. And by the way, you can say, well, North Dakota State had 43 carries. Colorado had 23. Do the math. North Dakota State averaged 3.7 yards per carry. Colorado averaged 2.6 yards per carry. North Dakota State, I get it, the FCS powerhouse, bullied Colorado up front. What the heck's going to happen when they play Nebraska next week? What's going to happen down the road against a Kansas State, and Arizona, Cincinnati? Oh my God, Utah's going to hurt. Listen, I love Prime. Utah's going to destroy Colorado on November 16th against Kansas, against Oklahoma State. What's going to happen when they play those fronts? That's got NFL guys. That's got great coaches in Division I college football. So that to me last night was, if you're a Colorado fan, if you're a Coach Prime supporter like myself, although I've been critical of him at times, that was not good at all. It's one thing to win close. It's one thing for another team to kind of fight with you and compete, and maybe they get a turnover here or there. North Dakota State beat Colorado up front and outcoached Colorado late. And by the way, the outcoaching aspect isn't necessarily even of whoever North Dakota State's coaches. Them outcoaching Deion Sanders didn't really have much to do with that guy as much as it had to do with Deion. That last 2-minute stretch, that was bad. That's where games are won and lost. Like Colorado, I think it was like 6 or 7 of their losses were 1-score games. That's situational football. That's coaching. This isn't to say Deion Sanders is a bad coach. Not at all. But when I've heard in the past, oh, he should go, maybe coach the Cowboys or coach somebody else in the National Football League. Deion has said in the past, like, hey, I don't want that. I want to mentor young kids. I want to set them up for success in their life. It's why I love Deion, because I do think that is genuine. But part of the reason he also shouldn't coach the NFL, I don't think he'd be good enough. Point blank, I don't think he'd be good enough. Like, that was bad. We criticized like Mike McCarthy for clock management. We criticized Kyle Shanahan for late game situation. Andy Reid used to have a reputation for being bad late. They weren't this bad. That was not good. A good showing for the Colorado Buffaloes. And again, nobody reasonable. Anybody who knows anything about college football knows Colorado is not going to sniff the college football playoff. But because of the expectations, the spotlight, and in some respects, mostly with respect to Shedeur Sanders, unneeded attention that didn't have to be there. There's going to be a lot of scrutiny for the Colorado Buffaloes this season. If you told me at the end of the year the Buffaloes don't make a bowl game, I would not be shocked. It would not catch me off guard. And they didn't a year ago, 4-8. But you know what? 4-8 wasn't a disaster for Colorado. They won 1 game the year before that, prior to Coach Prime arriving. But this could be, listen, Shedeur was arguing with old teammates on Twitter. Dion banned the reporter from asking questions at press conferences or asking questions to anybody. This could be a really long season for Colorado. And I'm curious. I don't think it's going to hurt Travis Hunter's stock. I think Travis Hunter is as special player as there is in the sport. He might be him and James Pierce for my Tennessee Vols, to me, are no doubt the top 2 non-quarterback picks in this upcoming NFL draft. They are all. Travis Hunter's going to be a Heisman finalist. I don't know what it does for Shedor's stock. And I'm curious, does Dion leave Colorado after Shedor gets drafted to the NFL? And by the way, Shiloh is dirty, bro. Like, Shiloh is a dirty player. So yeah, that's my take on Colorado. That was a brutal showing. The last 2 minutes made it worse. So, yeah, this could be a long season for Colorado. All right, let's shift to the... What do we got? Okay, shift to the NBA, then we'll finish with AFC and NFC West strengths and weaknesses. So, just want to cover this real quick. So, yesterday, I got some... Not just Dub Nation got some great news. Steph Curry is going to stay a Golden State Warrior for at least an extra year. So according to Woj, who reported it yesterday, Steph Curry signed a 1-year extension with the Golden State Warriors, $62.6 million that will keep under contract until the end of the 26-27 season. So Steph, in simplest terms, is going to be a Warrior, or is under contract with the Warriors for the next 3 years. And he and his wife Aisha were at like a charity golf event, and he was asked, and again, it's a casual environment. It's not like it's an exclusive piece by The Athletic or something, but he was asked, hey, are you going to retire a Warrior or spend your whole career with the Warriors? And he said, and I quote, "That's the plan." So that to me is the biggest thing for the Golden State Warriors this upcoming offseason. This offseason, really the next offseason, in this little time frame that they have. I'll keep emphasizing it until my face turns Golden State blue. You saw what Steph Curry is still capable at the Olympics. Like, Steph was having a rough showing. He wasn't shooting the ball well. Like, he was getting open shots, but he wasn't finishing at the rim. He wasn't knocking out. And then against Serbia, he goes berserk. Was the best player on the floor in that game. And then the last 2 minutes against France has one of the greatest 2-minute stretches in the history of the game of professional basketball. Given the circumstances, given what Team USA was up against, we know what Steph Curry did against France in the gold medal game. And what was considered by some a down year by Steph last year. Oh, so is Steph declining? He averaged 26 points, led the league easily in three-pointers made, and won Clutch Player of the Year. So if that was the down season for Steph Curry, I remember years ago when Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs didn't win the Super Bowl in 2021, didn't get there in 2021 when they lost to the Bengals. And all offseason, Mahomes, what it? And I said, that was Mahomes' down year? He threw 37 touchdowns and got to the AFC Championship game. That's his down year? I feel the same thing about Steph Curry. Now, Steph's older now than Mahomes was then, but the point remains. We can show you the Warriors roster. Alfred did a great job putting this together. This is what the Warriors roster looks like right in the here and now going into this season. So the starting lineup, this is at least what I think the starting lineup is going to be on opening night. Steph Curry, Brandon Pajemski, Andrew Wiggins, Draymond Green, Trace Jackson Davis. Pajemski and Trace Jackson Davis were excellent picks by the front office a couple of years ago in the draft. Pajemski has got the potential. I mean, the front office felt he was untouchable for what that's worth. And obviously, we know Steph and Draymond are the surefire starters. On the bench, you have Jonathan Kuminga, who's ascending. You have Buddy Hield, who's a top 5 shooter in the world. You have Kyle Anderson, who's a good role player. DeAnthony Melton, same thing. He's a guy who's capable of averaging double figures. Kevon Looney, Gary Payton II, Moses Moody, and the kid they drafted in the second round, Quentin Post. That's the Warriors roster. That, to me, and I said throughout free agency, I think the Warriors are a better team now than they were a year ago. Now, the problem is, a year ago, they were the 10 seed and got waxed in the play-in. That's the issue. And it's why, and again, it's uncomfortable to say, and I know, some Warriors fans may disagree with me, but I know I'm right. They were better based off their salary cap situation, based on the second apron, based on what Klay Thompson was wanting. Given what they added, the Warriors were better off letting Klay go and bringing in Buddy Hield, Kyle Anderson, and DeAnthony Melton. Those three guys will provide more depth, Peeled will provide more consistent shooting. Anderson, it provides good solid defense, and Melton, we know what he's able to do on the offensive side, and is a good defensive player as well. That's what they added. That, to me, in the Western Conference is capable of being like the 5, 6, 7 seed. So kind of flirting with the upper half of the play-in to you barely avoid the play-in and you're like the 5 or 6 seed as currently constructed. Steph's still too good to be in that spot, to be in a situation where the Warriors, I think with this roster, the absolute best case scenario is they win one playoff series and get knocked out in round 2, kind of like a couple of years ago. That's where they're at. I will say it until I'm blue in the face, as blue as the shirt I'm wearing, because of how great Steph still is. And because of, by the way, he did what he did last year because he was carrying an insane offensive load. Steph literally, the Warriors' offense went to die the last couple of years when Steph was off the floor. If you give him an all-star level teammate, the game opens up more for Steph. The other guy gets to be able to rely on Steph in certain moments, late in close games, and the role players play their roles at a high level. Steve Kerr is the head coach. That team can win the NBA championship with an all-star teammate next to Steph. It's why I was all in the Paul George thing. The Clippers did dirty business. They hurt themselves in the process because that's the Clippers. Okay. The Warriors missed out on Paul George. They then try to get Lauri Markkanen. Now, Brandon Pajemski was an untouchable guy. Still don't really know how I feel about that because I really like Lauri Markkanen. They missed out on that because Markkanen signed an extension with the Jazz. To me, the next goal, the next target for the Golden State Warriors to give themselves a chance at winning the championship, because Steph is still good enough to lead you there if he has the pieces, and they don't have that piece yet. The next target should be Kevin Durant. You're telling me with the Phoenix Suns, and by the way, I liked the fact that they added Tyus Jones. I've been a Tyus Jones fan for a long time, since his days with the Memphis Grizzlies. Y'all, a lot of folks know how I feel about him. I love him in the role that he plays. But it's still not a well-constructed Suns roster. Booker and Beal still do not fit together, and they don't fit as a duo with Kevin Durant in terms of, KD can fit anywhere, but if the goal is to win a championship, that's not going to work. And they downgraded a head coach and adding Mike Budenholzer. You're telling me if the Phoenix Suns, by midseason, are in essentially the same spot they were last year, which is the same spot the Nets were the year before that and the year before that, mid, hanging above 500, realistically probably can't compete for a championship. You're telling me Kevin Durant, after playing with Steph Curry at the Olympics, he saw up close, and you see Steph and KD, they've always been good. They've always been cool, and obviously as they were teammates, we know how dominant they were together, and we know how tight they were on the basketball court. You're telling me if KD doesn't see Steph still doing what he does, and that to me is, because some folks might say, well, would that not be an admission of a failure by Kevin Durant? The fact that he left the Warriors, didn't get past the second round with the Nets or the Suns, is that not an admission of failure that you couldn't lead a team to a championship? I think that's the wrong way to look at it. Let's turn that around. When Kevin Durant went to the Golden State Warriors in 2016, they did not need him to become an NBA champion. A, they'd already done that. B, they were the favorites coming into the following season despite losing to Cleveland. And Steph was the back-to-back unanimous MVP. It was a great roster, great coach in Kerr. The Warriors were going to win another couple championships without Kevin Durant. They needed Kevin Durant to become the most unstoppable team. In my mind, the greatest team ever assembled. They're certainly in that conversation. They need Kevin Durant to win. The Warriors do not win a championship next year if they don't have an all-star teammate next to Steph. They just don't. And I love Kuminga. I think he's going to be an all-star. I don't think he's going to be that right now. And that's got to be the focal point for the Warriors. Steph's under contract for 3 more years. And then, by the way, he may still stay with the Warriors beyond 2027. But that to me is kind of the window for the Warriors. You got a 3-year window to compete with Steph Curry. He showed you by signing this extension, I want to stay here. I'm a Warrior. I want to win with the Warriors. You reward him. If there's any franchise that owes their superstar, now that LeBron's not in Cleveland, if there's any franchise that owes their superstar to put the requisite roster around him to compete for championships, it's the Golden State Warriors with Steph Curry. Before Steph Curry, the Warriors were valued at like $370 million as a franchise back in 2009. In 2024, they're worth $8 billion, the second most valuable sports franchise in the world to the Dallas Cowboys. Not the Yankees, not the Knicks, not the Lakers, not Manchester United, the Golden State Warriors. That's Steph Curry. He's made a lot of folks rich in the Bay Area. He's made Joe Lacob rich. He's made Peter Guber rich. He made Bob Myers rich. Steve Kerr. You owe him. That to me, and again, a lot of Warriors fans have been critical of Mike Dunleavy Jr. I still think the guy has a plan in place. I've liked his last couple of drafts. Clearly, his 23 draft was great with Pajemski and Trace Jackson Davis. You've got to add an all-star caliber player. If you do, you can compete with Oklahoma City, who I have right now as the favorite to win the West. You can compete with Dallas. You can compete with the Minnesota Timberwolves. But we're in a spot right now with the Warriors where they did get better this offseason. I truly believe that. I think this is a playoff team. They are not a deep playoff team. You've got to give Steph the requisite help. And by the way, it helps Kevin Durant's case too. Hey, they need me this go-around. They didn't need me last time. Draymond told me they didn't need me. Hey, we don't need you. We won't without you. Leave. With some expletives in there, obviously. I'm telling you right now, Kevin Durant needs to be the next target. Some have suggested Giannis. That'd be great. That'd be great to have Giannis as a Warrior. It feels like a little bit of a pipe dream. I don't see that happening. Got to get Steph some more help. So there you go. Last topic. I've done this the last 3 shows on Carving It Up, and this is going to be the last one we do before next week, which is NFL Kickoff Week. We're going to have Bryson's best 10 NFL teams. We're going to have predictions for the season with my man Ryan Flowers, all likelihood this upcoming Wednesday, so stay tuned for that, my Carving It Up 2024 NFL season preview show. We're going to have predictions, if I were a betting man, Bryson's bleak bet, upset of the week, all of that. So this segment is kind of like the goodbye to the offseason and the hello and the opening of the door to the 2024 NFL season. I cannot wait. So the strengths and weaknesses, we're going to look at the West teams, AFC and NFC, so we can get the background music going on right now. The biggest strengths and weaknesses of every team in the AFC and NFC West. Here we go. In the AFC West, we're going to start with the back-to-back Super Bowl champion, Kansas City Chiefs. What's their biggest strength? It's pretty obvious. They have the second greatest quarterback ever in his prime. Listen, we can argue where Mahomes plays. I don't think you can make the case that he's not Mount Rushmore. The man's already got 3 Super Bowls, 3 Super Bowl MVPs, and 2 NFL MVPs. No other quarterback in the history of the National Football League can make that statement other than the greatest quarterback ever, Tom Brady. Now, Mahomes got a ways to catch Brady, but this is a situation where we know you have Andy Reid. We know if Travis Kelce is still productive. That defense, even though they did lose L'Jarius Sneed to the Tennessee Titans, that defense is still stacked, led by Chris Jones. Offensively, I thought they got better by adding Hollywood Brown. Rasheed Rice, it doesn't look like he's going to be suspended this year. And I'm skeptical of Xavier Worthy, but it's Andy Reid. It's Mahomes. They'll make him work. Mahomes is awesome. We know that. That's their biggest strength. Their biggest weakness is kind of just a question more than anything. Complacency. That's, to me, the only thing that can hold the Chiefs back from winning 3 straight Super Bowls. And in terms of what will be the downfall, what could hurt them in the regular season and could hurt them in the playoffs is, man, we won the last 2. We made a lot of money. We've gotten rings. That's, to me, the only thing. And I don't think that's going to be a problem for the Chiefs because this is a situation where collectively as a team, hold on a minute, we got a chance to go for 3 straight Super Bowls. That's never been done before in the history of the NFL. We can do that. And for Mahomes, especially when you consider the fact that the players thought he was the second best quarterback and the 4th best player in the league. Oh, Mahomes going to come in pissed off and ready to go. So that's complacency is the only real concern after the Chiefs. And even that, I don't have a lot of concerns about. Maybe early in the season, but as we get in December and January, that's going to be an issue. To the Las Vegas Raiders, their biggest strength is the defense improved drastically under Antonio Pierce. So look, we know Max Crosby is one of the premier pass rushers in the National Football League. We know what he brings to the table. But defensively for the Raiders last year, they were abysmal the last few seasons up until they made Antonio Pierce the interim head coach after firing Josh McDaniels. They end up promoting Pierce to the head coach this offseason. Players love him, and the defense performed big time when he was there. I'm about to get into their weakness, but it kind of ties into their strength is in order for the Raiders to win as many games as they are capable of winning, that defense is going to have to show up each and every Sunday and perform well. They're capable of that, I think, on a pretty consistent basis under Antonio Pierce. That's their biggest strength. Their biggest weakness is pretty obvious. They have the worst quarterback room in the NFL. If Gardner Minshew, who I like, low-end starter, high-end backup, that's Gardner Minshew. He fits that mold perfectly. If he's your backup, man, you are set. If he's your starter and Aiden O'Connell is your backup, you're in bad shape. And in a division that's got Mahomes, Herbert, and we'll see what Bo Nix is, Raiders in rough shape. Listen, and then they added Brock Bowers, who's one of the best tight end prospects in the last decade. They need somebody to throw him the football. And Gardner's fine. Gardner's low-end starter, high-end backup. He's a good bridge guy. Gardner's not a franchise quarterback, and Aiden O'Connell dang sure ain't a franchise quarterback. To the Denver Broncos, their biggest strength, Peyton always gets the most out of his quarterbacks. He always does. So we go back to what he did with Drew Brees. Drew Brees, it looked like his career was over with the shoulder injuries with the Chargers. He goes to New Orleans with Sean Payton. Not only do they help rebuild that city after Katrina, they win a Super Bowl. Brees becomes one of the greatest quarterbacks ever and sets 1 million records. After Brees retires, his last year, Sean Payton's last year with the Saints, they play 4 quarterbacks. And they almost make the playoffs in an NFC that had the 49ers, Rams, when the Rams were stacked and won the Super Bowl. The Cowboys had a really good roster in 2021. A lot of other teams, the Eagles, Saints almost made the playoffs with a 9-8 record. Last year, coming into this year, Russell Wilson looked like genuinely the worst quarterback in the National Football League. He pairs up with Sean Payton, and it wasn't perfect. The Broncos didn't make the playoffs. But Russell Wilson threw 26 touchdowns, 9 picks. That's pretty good. Given what the expectations were, that's a lot of credit to Sean Payton. So now he gets to work with Bo Nix. Now, I have skepticism about Bo Nix. Again, he's a little bit smaller than I like, a little bit older than I like for a rookie, but he's with Sean Payton. I think that can work. The Broncos' biggest weakness is they have a very thin skill position group. I don't know what their running game is going to be. And in terms of wide receiver, Courtland Sutton's really, really talented. After that, they've got a lot of, I think they have like Marvin Mims. I mean, they have some guys that maybe can work for the time being. But if the Broncos want any prayer shot at contending for like that last AFC playoff spot, their wide receiving core is going to have to step up, and I just don't think they're capable of doing that. That's the Broncos' biggest weakness. And finally, the Los Angeles Chargers, their biggest strength. Herbert is great and now has a great coach. Herbert, it reminded me a lot of Matthew Stafford in terms of his talent, what he brought to the table in terms of size, arm angles, arm strength. But he had Anthony Lynn, who was fine, and he had Brandon Staley, who was probably the worst coach in the NFL. And he had Kellen Moore last year, just as a kick in the rear. And now he gets Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh, who goes to crap situations time and time again. San Diego State was a disaster. They were good. Stanford was the joke of college football. He goes there and they beat USC with Pete Carroll. Then he goes to the NFL, the 49ers, who were one of the jokes of the NFL at his first 3 seasons in San Francisco. NFC Championship, Super Bowl, NFC Championship. He goes to Michigan, which was a disaster. By year 2, they won double-digit games. By year 8, they were in the college football playoff, which they did 3 straight years, and they capped it off last year by winning the national championship game. I'm as big of a Jim Harbaugh fan as there is. I think he's a phenomenal coach. I've loved Justin Herbert since his days at Oregon. To me, that team could be really special this upcoming season. Potentially it's a good playoff team. The biggest weakness for the Chargers, though, is they don't have a true number 1 wide receiver. They just don't. Listen, I like Josh Palmer, Tennessee guy, go Vols. I don't know what they have. Quentin Johnson looks like an all-out bust. I liked him out of TCU, liked what he did after the catch against, ironically, Harbaugh in Michigan. They'll probably either have to draft a guy next year or maybe acquire a guy at the trade deadline. Maybe if the Tennessee Titans move DeAndre Hopkins or something, they could go after him. Or if Tampa Bay were to move Mike Evans, that'd be a good move for the Los Angeles Chargers. They just don't have a true number one guy. They'll have to do it by committee, and they'll have to do it via their run game. The biggest strength, let's go to the NFC West now. The biggest strength for the team that lost the Super Bowl to the Chiefs, the San Francisco 49ers, biggest strength is brilliant head coach and elite defensive line. Listen, Kyle Shanahan, for his faults in terms of the fact that he has blown a lot of double-digit leads in the fourth quarter of the playoffs, back in Atlanta as the OC against Tom Brady in the Super Bowl, and in 2 Super Bowls against Mahomes, and an NFC Championship game against the LA Rams. I get that. The guy is, I talked about Sean Payton getting the most out of his quarterbacks. Kyle Shanahan's even better. I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo is a certified backup. He is a backup quarterback in the NFL. And Kyle Shanahan got him to the precipice of a championship in 2019 and the precipice of another Super Bowl appearance in 2021. Jimmy G's got a noodle arm, all due respect, doesn't move well in the pocket, and is just really limited. And Kyle Shanahan took him to the next level in terms of getting him to the Super Bowl, despite bad playoff performances. Brock Purdy is way better than Jimmy G in my estimation, because I think Jimmy G is a backup. Purdy is a solid starter in the NFL, but he is smaller. He was Mr. Relevant for a reason. Arm strength is good. It's not special. Kyle Shanahan, because of his brilliance and the roster in San Francisco, has taken him to a new level. And in terms of their defensive line, I mean, it used to be a running joke over the years. The Niners always drafted a defensive lineman in the first round. Well, it's gone pretty well for him with guys like Bosa, Armstead, Hargrave. Great defensive players on that defensive line. They can bully any offensive line in the NFL up front. That's the biggest strength for the San Francisco 49ers. Their biggest strength, however, is, I kind of alluded to it, the quarterback is somewhat limited. Not totally limited. He's not Jimmy G. That's what some folks get misinterpreted with the Purdy Jimmy G discussion. Purdy is a very good quarterback. Good to very good. Arms solid, moves well, that works in the Shanahan offense, but he is almost completely reliant on Christian McCaffrey, on Deebo Samuel, on Trent Williams. McCaffrey's dealt with injuries. Trent Williams is not in the building right now, and Deebo Samuel, we know, has an injury history. So that's kind of what it was in the Super Bowl, right? The defense for the 49ers played great throughout. Offensively, they ran the football, I thought, pretty effectively with McCaffrey. They just didn't quite have enough at the quarterback position to win it all. In the end, against Kansas City, that's their biggest weakness. To the Los Angeles Rams, who I think will challenge the Niners for that NFC West, their biggest strength is perfect mix of veterans and young guys. So we know what the Rams have in terms of guys that were there for that Super Bowl title a few seasons ago. Matthew Stafford, Cooper Kupp, they got a lot of dudes. Defensively, I love what they had. Drafted the kid out of Florida State in the first round, being able to develop Puka Nacua. They've got a lot of dudes. They got a good linebacking core in Los Angeles. Last couple of drafts for Les Snead, who's one of the premier GMs of the league, and the Rams have been excellent. And we know who Sean McVay is. He's one of the 5 best coaches in football. The biggest weakness, though, for the Rams is Stafford's health at this stage of his career. There's not a lot I don't like about the LA Rams. That's the only thing. I haven't locked in my Super Bowl pick quite yet out of the NFC. The Rams are one of the teams I'm considering. That's my only concern. They did lose Aaron Donald, too. That's obviously a massive loss, but I do think they've improved that defensive line on the edges. If Stafford, given his recent injury history, gets hurt, well, then the season goes up in smoke, and the Rams are, listen, they got Jimmy G. That's not gonna work. So that's my biggest concern and the biggest weakness for the LA Rams. So the Seattle Seahawks, their biggest strength is defense and wide receiving core is underrated. It's pretty good. Defensively, they have a lot of good pieces, particularly in the secondary on that Seattle defense the last 2 years that were drafted under John Schneider and Pete Carroll. Now they add Mike McDonald, who was probably the best defensive coordinator in the league last year with the Ravens. Now he goes to the Seahawks. Their identity in many ways is defense and running game. But their wide receiving core, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith, and Jigba, that is a great trio at the wide receiver position. But the biggest weakness is Geno's good. They need better. Listen, Geno's a good quarterback. He, to me, is on a tier higher than the low-end starter, high-end backup category. Geno has proven in the right situation he's a starting quarterback in this league. He got to the playoffs 2 years ago, almost did a year ago as well. But they need a dynamic playmaker at that position, especially given what they have on the outside, as I just mentioned, and they just don't have that. Geno, respect him, but he's not that. To the Arizona Cardinals, finally, their biggest strength, Kyler and Marvin Harrison Jr. will bring excitement to the offense. So, listen, the Cardinals were pegged by many, including myself, to be the worst team in the NFL last year. I thought they were going to be unwatchable. As it turned out, listen, they only won 4 games, but they beat the Cowboys. They beat the Eagles, which really screwed up Philly's season at the end. So, they won a close game against Atlanta. They did a good job, especially once Kyler came back to kind of establishing identity, running the football on offense. And Jonathan Gannon, I mean, we see what the Eagles defense is without him. He's a good defensive coach. Well, in the draft, they take one of the greatest wide receiver prospects ever, maybe the best player in the draft, just pure talent-wise, along with Caleb Williams, in Marvin Harrison Jr., who is just special to Ohio State. I think he's going to be special in the NFL. Kyler's got a number 1 wideout, and they'll be fun to watch. I'm not saying the Cardinals will be a playoff team or anything, but they'll be fun to watch. Their biggest weakness is they get bullied up front on both sides of the ball. Kyler, in terms of offense, is running for his life. The offensive line for the Cardinals is not good. And defensively, they gave up like 141 rush yards per game. So if you're playing the Niners, if you're playing the Niners, they're a terrible matchup for a team like Arizona. The Rams can run the ball. The Seahawks can run the ball. So in terms of what the identity of the NFC West is, the Cardinals don't really fit it that well at all. They need to get some big guys up front. They did draft an offensive lineman a season ago. What was it? The Paris Johnson kid, I think, out of Ohio State. They still need to add more pieces. So that's the biggest weakness for the Arizona Cardinals. There you go. So, look, and Arizona's a weird team this year. Like, I think they're somewhere between. So there's always a worst to first team in the NFL, a team that everybody thinks can be terrible and ends up like winning the division. That's not going to be the Cardinals. They're not beating out I don't think they're beating out the Seahawks, but they're certainly not beating out the 49ers or the Rams. I mean, don't be shocked if they win 8 games. Don't be, like, I think Gannon's actually a solid coach. Kyler, we know he's obviously better than what they had for the majority of last year. Marvin Harrison Jr. is spectacular. So they've got some pieces I like, but they still need a lot more in order to compete in the NFC. All right. Whew. Long show today. We had 7 topics and this is a jam-packed show of all views back. I got Oregon beating Georgia in the inaugural 12-team college football playoff to win the national championship. Talked about Dak and the crazy narrative surrounding him and Jerry doing Jerry stuff. The Niners and their cap situation now that they just signed Aiyuk. The Warriors need to add another star with Steph and Colorado. I mean, could not have been a more loaded show today. And college football hasn't really started yet, and the NFL hasn't started at all until next Thursday. Next time I'm back here in the studio, folks, there's an NFL game that week. We are back, baby. So with that is all the time we have for today's show. Appreciate everybody stopping by. As always, be sure to catch Carving Up Live on Monday, on Labor Day. We will be doing a show on Labor Day at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific time, right here on Facebook, as well as the Carving It Up YouTube channel and the Grid Network YouTube channel. Of course, be sure to like, share, comment, and please take 2 seconds out of your day. Hit that big red subscribe button down there. It helps the channel grow exponentially. We are on the road, on the path, hopefully, to 5,000 subscribers. That is the goal. That is the objective. And that is what we're aiming for on this show. If you have not subscribed, hey, just takes a couple seconds. Hit that big red subscribe button down there, and boom, you're part of the Carving Up family. It's a very supportive group, and it's a group that, for those that have subscribed, thank you so much. I love every single one of y'all taking the time out of y'all's day to give this show a shot, to give this channel a shot. Please tell your friends about Carving Up Live. Please tell your family about Carving Up Live. Please tell everybody, everybody you know, your neighbor, everybody, about Carving Up Live, except for your sleeping cat. Nealon has been in a Nealon mood. Moody, up, down, feisty, he's Nealon. And by the way, very appropriate. Nealon Stadium, season starts tomorrow. Go Vols. Also, just as importantly, be sure to go subscribe to the Grid Network. That is GRYD, the Grid Podcast Network, right here on Twitter, as well as the Carving It Up YouTube channel and the Grid Network YouTube channel. Why did I say the Carving? Sorry, I'm so in a zone. My bad. Subscribe to the Grid Network. I'm going to get this right. And check out all of our content creators on all podcast platforms: Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google. Actually, Google doesn't exist anymore. Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and everywhere you get your favorite podcasts. You can find us at the Grid Network, where we dare to be different. Check out my man Patrick writing great articles on the Grid's website. A lot of great stuff going on here at the Grid. So with that said, I will see y'all on Labor Day on Monday. Please be sure to stay safe out there. Please be sure to take care of your physical as well as your mental health. And please, please, please be sure to contact your local state representatives and senators to demand change for gun violence in America. Doesn't matter where you lean, right, left, center. This is an issue that affects every single one of us on a day-to-day basis in this country. And no matter what either side of the aisle tries to gaslight you on, oh, it's not a problem. Oh, there's only one solution to the problem. Both are BS. Both are not true. It's a huge problem that needs a number of nuanced, detailed solutions to it. So especially this being election year, if either person on either side does not show any inclination to use their power to fix this, vote against them because we got to get this fixed. All right. Angel and Caitlin are playing right now. I got to check that game out. I just talked about Caitlin the other day, uploaded a video today. Angel, Caitlin, that'll be fun to watch. Tennessee's back. College football's back. All is right in the world. I'll see y'all soon. God bless y'all. Peace out. Vols going to the playoff, baby. You already know it. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube, and be sure to go click that big red subscribe button and check out the other clips and full shows from Carving It Up Live, as well as our other incredible content creators here on the Grid Network.